Many folks just called it the summer of 1800 and freeze to death. It inspired Frankenstein and influenced Dracula. Lord Byron wrote his poem Darkness during and about that strange year. No one knew what was happening or why.
In 1816, there was no summer in many parts of the world, thanks to a huge volcanic eruption in Indonesia. In fact, the coldest temperatures on record in Europe between 1700 and 2000 happened during the volcanic winter of 1816. It was a worldwide disaster.
Here's the story of the year without a summer. Could it happen again?
Let's dig into this.
We're not going to get too technical here, but it's important to say that the Earth had been going through a cooling period for a couple centuries that we now call the Little Ice Age. Temperatures had slowly dropped, winters were longer, colder, and had much more snow, especially in North America and Europe. Rivers froze, harbors had to be closed due to ice reducing the movement of supplies. Crops failed, some people starved, and people tried to adapt to the changing weather.
In April of 1815, near the end of the Little Ice Age, Mount Tambora, a gigantic volcano in Indonesia, erupted, sending 3 columns of fire, smoke, and ash 25 miles high. It was the most powerful volcanic eruption ever recorded by humans. It ejected an estimated 36 cubic miles of stuff into the atmosphere when more than 13,000 feet of Tambora's peak was blown off, forming a huge caldera. Around 10 million metric cubic tons of dirt, rocks, ash, and pumice. This ash traveled around the world and lowered temperatures everywhere.
The island of Sumbawa, where Mount Tambora is located, was totally devastated. The sound of explosions could be heard over 1,600 miles away, and eruptions occurred until the middle of July and blew more ash and debris into the atmosphere, along with toxic gases. All vegetation on the island was destroyed.
Trees and plants were thrown or washed into the oceans, where they mixed with ash and pumice to create giant rafts up to 3 miles across of floating debris. A 13-foot high tsunami from the blast hit neighboring islands. It is estimated that somewhere around 4,600 died in the original blast and the tsunami alone. As many as 100,000 died from the after effects, including famine and disease, in the Indonesian islands.
In Asia, cold weather killed trees and rice crops, and incessant rains caused floods, killing people, animals, and even more crops. By the end of June in 1815, the ash from the eruption was creating strange looking sunsets, inspiring artists in London. Europe and eastern United States were beginning to experience darker skies, heavier rains, and cooler weather as the ash plume reached the stratosphere. By the summer of 1816, temperatures had dropped as much as 3 degrees below normal worldwide. 3 degrees doesn't seem like much, but it was enough.
In Europe, it rained and rained, causing great floods. It reportedly rained for 8 weeks straight in Ireland. Then there were reports of brown or eerie red snow in some areas. Frost in July and August ruined crops and caused the worst famine in the 19th century.
And one of the worst epidemics of typhoid in history hit Europe, made worse by malnutrition and people moving from town to town looking for food. It is almost impossible to know the exact numbers, but estimates of more than 65,000 dying from typhoid alone are common.
The eastern United States experienced what came to be called a dry fog starting early in 1816. The air was saturated with particles that made everything darker, and there was a reddish hue from the fog. It didn't blow away with wind or stop when it rained, and it put people on edge.
In early June of 1816, snowstorms hit parts of New England, leaving drifts almost 2 feet high. Ice storms hit Pennsylvania and killed crops. Frozen birds dropped from the sky, and livestock froze in the fields. People were reportedly sledding and skating in Virginia in June. That July was the third coldest on record. Ice covered lakes and rivers from Maine to Pennsylvania.
What few fruit and vegetable crops survived didn't mature or ripen. Much was lost to mold. Only 1/4 of the corn crop was edible by humans or animals, and the New England Historical Society has records of folks resorting to eating raccoons and pigeons to survive.
People ate nettles and wild turnips and hedgehogs, and made bread from ground nut shells and oats when they could find them. There was no feed for farm animals, and it was so cold some farmers reportedly tied the sheared wool back onto sheep, hoping to save them.
By August, the frost was as far south as northern Georgia, and the skies were never clear throughout most of the country. Snow fell, and reports of brown or even blue snow were reported. Some reports say there was at least one hard frost every month in 1816 in the eastern United States, and folks had no idea why this was happening.
Religious revival meetings and church services became more popular than ever as people searched for answers. They also started to think long term solutions to the problems that they were facing. Hundreds of thousands of people started to move to the Midwest and Ohio Valley, looking for less harsh winters and better growing conditions. Historians believe this migration resulted in Indiana becoming a state in 1816 and Illinois in 1818.
Some historians believe the German inventor Karl Drais came up with the idea of the velocipede because of the year without a summer. It, along with its descendant, the bicycle, would be the first mode of personal transportation that did not depend on horses.
And a group of friends, including Mary Shelley, John Polidori, Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron, all decided to get away from the gloom and cold and disease for a vacation. During their trip to Lake Geneva, Switzerland, they held a contest to keep each other entertained during the foul weather. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Polidori wrote The Vampire, which influenced Bram Stoker's 1897 book Dracula, and Lord Byron wrote a poem called Darkness, about the end of the world.
Today, Tambora's caldera is 3 miles in diameter and over 3,000 feet deep, and still an active volcano. This incredible photo shows the lake formed at the bottom and the steep walls left after the original blast. Occasionally smoke can be seen, and the smell of sulfur is in the air. Quiet for 2 centuries, it doesn't seem ready to explode again for quite a while. But if an eruption like that in 1815 happened today, it would be far more devastating.
For one thing, the world's population has exploded from just about 1 billion in the early 1800s to over 7.75 billion in 2020. We've learned in the past few years that we're so dependent on those who grow and process our food that even disruptions for a few weeks cause panic. Worldwide crop failures would cause chaos.
And our transport systems for food and other necessities would certainly come to a screeching halt if planes could not fly, ships could not sail, trains could not run, and trucks were pulled off the roads due to extreme ash, like the dry fog created by Tambora in 1816.
Estimates of the total number of deaths from the year without a summer ranged from 19,000 to 60,000, in addition to the 100,000 who died in Indonesia and the 65,000 deaths from the typhoid outbreak. But we will never know how many actually died. Bodies have been discovered on Tambora as recently as 2004. What we can say for certain is, if it happened today, the death toll would be in the millions.
Thanks for watching. Hey, here's another Dragon Den video you might like.
And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button.
And you can hit the notification bell if you'd like to know when our videos come out.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.